Fantastic.
That's fun.
If I can hear about 20 F-bombs like in the midday, I'm happy.
It's always funny to me when people get upset about obscenity.
I don't care.
Well, part of me is like, we're talking about people getting murdered in the street by police officers, and the one thing you leave with, I didn't like the F word being said so much.
That language.
That offends you more than racism?
By the way, I want to say, just for the record,
Yeah.
I am white, yes, but white chocolate, it's never been chocolate. I
Correct.
hate white chocolate.
Made
I
out
do
of
not
cocoa
like
butter.
white chocolate.
That's right. That's right.
And just because it just isn't. All right,
I do enjoy it, though. That is a lie.
You do? I hate it.
Everything else is the truth except about the
Except for that, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And racism's made up also. I made that up for the
Well, we
show.
all know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna a couple little simple questions. Then we got some questions that are almost questions by committee. That doesn't mean they're not great questions. It's just they're a little bit wordy. But we'll have to kind of hang in with that because we're gonna get to. There's a point to all of them.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay. So what made you laugh as a kid?
What made me laugh as a kid? I mean, stupid stuff because I was a kid. Like funny sounds and faces and nothing too clever.
Well, at what point did you realize or become conscious that you yourself were funny?
When I would make my brother laugh, because my brother's extremely funny, and making him laugh was always a big thing. So we'd crack each other up, and I knew that when I was in groups of friends, I was the one that was usually funny. Except when I was in groups of friends who were funny, and then I usually was the one that was the most quiet, because I was thinking about things I would say later. And apparently, when you're just like a really funny, quick person, you just say it. You don't think about, let me save my commentary for strangers. And so that's the difference between a clown and a comic, I think.
But your brother, he was like your first real.
My brother's he's a tough critic, and he's the funniest person I know. So that's
So you do political comedy, and your brother Ashok was in the comedic political rap group Das Racist.
That's correct.
Right? Anyone
Yes.
know about that? Yeah, a little smattering there.
Yep.
So that is a lot of subversive literary brain power. You kind of talked a little bit about your parents, but in what way did your parents or your childhood experience kind of get you guys going on those particular paths that you followed?
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I think my mom has been asking herself that a lot. Like, how did this happen? What did I? It's framed differently. It's like, what did I do wrong versus what did happen in their childhood that led them down this path. I think for comedians, it's usually good when you have some kind of outsider perspective. So I think being a person of color already gives you some of that. Being the child of immigrants gives you some of that. And also, it was that weird realization that my reality in Queens, New York, the most diverse place in the world, was not rest of the world, rest of the country, I should say. And you knew that pretty quickly by watching mass media and being like, well, all my friends and neighbors are from all over the world, and none of them exist on television. None of them exist in film. And I think that was that first realization of like being both inside and outside a group, and I think that double lens is something that a lot of oppressed people have. Like they know, how the world sees them and what it's like to be within a group where you don't stand out the same way. So, I mean that from an early age I knew, and then I think I went to college in Maine, which is less diverse than Queens. It's like the Portland of the East Coast, and it's and I think I knew from there, like, okay, when people ask me where are you from, it's clear they don't want to hear Queens, and that's usually an indication that, okay, like this country is more complicated, and my perspective was valuable,
Do you find it tricky to write comedic material that has a political activist bent? And the reason I ask is that sometimes it seems like a message or an agenda could potentially overpower the comedy itself. So
I agree.
that line.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't write with an agenda. I mean, I know that's hard to understand, but like this is stuff I care about and believe. I think that there's enough egomania with that if you're going with just performing in general. 'Cause look at me, But like, if you add that with, I'm going to change the world with these jokes.
Right.
I mean, that's not going to lead to good material and an honest performance. So the things I talk about, I care about, and I don't think about it in terms of I need to say this to make this point. Like at the end of the day, if they're not laughing, I failed. I mean, these are jokes. I mean, that's the point of this. In terms of like, like there is a risk. I mean, certainly when people try out new jokes, for most comics, I think there's just a risk of it not being funny. I think for me, because I talk about what I care about, there's a risk of it not being funny and also coming off as self-righteous. And that's annoying. I mean, but I know I run that risk until you find the right series of words and the right punchline. I'm constantly playing with that line.
Right.
So
Working the craft.
yeah.
As I mentioned in your intro, you have a Master's of Human Rights from the London School of Economics, which I am sure exposed you to a multitude of flaws in this world. Here in Seattle, the mayor has declared a state of emergency around homelessness, and economic inequities and racial injustice is rampant. In short, it is a very depressing landscape. Despair would be an understandable response. How did you come to comedy being your response to what you see?
When I started doing comedy, it certainly wasn't a response to what I saw. It was, I wanted girls to like me.
That's always a driver, right?
I was 16. You know, there wasn't. I couldn't play an instrument, and my poetry was god awful. So
how was your sports? How was sports for you?
Well, I mean, yeah. You know.
Okay, we'll move on.
This isn't the face of a franchise. But I think you all like that because it's alliteration. But I think, yeah, I mean, yeah, for me this was the one thing I knew how to do. And I loved stand-up at an early age, and I saw Margaret Cho perform on TV when I was like 15, and I knew that this was something I wanted to do. Like, it was pretty clear at that point. It's such a magical thing. So that's how I got into comedy. It was not for like the most righteous of reasons. And plus, there's a rush in performing that I really don't get out of anything else in life. It's such a beautiful thing. And but in terms of why I write about what I write about, I think post 9/11, I was a very different being. You know, I was 19. I was in school. Like, my city had been attacked. I was. All this talk of how we were a unified country. Like, if you actually, you know, lived the life that me and my friends had, you know, we knew that was bullshit. Like, you know, if it was so unified, how come our communities are being attacked by people in our neighborhood? You know, it was more common. My mom had a flag on her window, both because she believes in this country and patriotism, and also she didn't want someone to throw a rock through the window. I mean, that's what life was like. So, I mean, that reality, knowing how many people were being deported, how the government was targeting people, the fact we were going to war, I started questioning the world, and all of a sudden I had an act that didn't reflect who I was as a person. And all the comics that I respect the most throughout history were honest with their point of view. They shared their truth, and that was what I found most compelling. I found people who found uncomfortable places and found ways to create some release, like the most rewarding, like the most exciting, and that form was the most rewarding for me. So that's where, you know, it led to. It's certainly not necessarily the easiest path, but I really don't know how else to do it. Yeah.
I think it's talking a little bit too just about satire, though. About that satire, often it looks like you're attacking a particular group. Actually, you're making the opposite point, and sometimes that can get lost.
I think if you're good at satire, well,
Yeah.
first of all, like, satire is not a singular thing. It depends on the audience you're speaking towards, right? Like, it's interesting where people say, well, I was being ironically racist, okay? Why don't you get that? Well, you're also talking to a mostly white audience, so it's different when there are people of color who are like, I don't like this. Well, why don't you get it? No, I get it. It's just like, you know, the things you're saying that are ironic, people have said that to me at face value,
Right.
so I don't really like hearing it coming from your
Right.
mouth. And
Right.
the other thing is, when we talk about representation, I want people of color to say what they want. Like, I don't need someone to be satirical about race or about other people's experiences when I can just say it bluntly. Like, what's the point? I don't need someone else to speak for me anymore.
Are there any
Yeah.
topics off limits for you comedically? Or do you
No.
think any topics are off limits for people?
No topic is off limits. It has nothing to, I mean, it's just like any conversation you have with another human being. You can basically talk about anything, but how do you talk about them? And what, like, how well do you know the people you're talking to? And how much do they trust you, and do you trust them? You know, it's about context, it's, you know, whether the context that's given or the context you create. Rarely do I blame the audience. That's not true. I blame the audience a lot. But I think, but that has,
you
but
blame
that,
Table of 74 over there.
that has
earlier.
more to do with ego more than
Sure,
anything else.
yeah,
But to be
right.
honest, your job as a performer and as anybody who's using words to communicate anything is to get the message across.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's on you. So I mean, that to me is you know, the end goal. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's said in doing racial justice work, white people often have to get to a place of being uncomfortable before they start to get it.
Yeah.
Now, you have a joke in which you equate British India with Nazi Germany. Okay.
Oh, it's.
But
Oh
but in
boy.
the clip, no, but it's a good joke. It's a great joke.
Well,
but
I
in
mean, I
that
think-
clip, the audience kind of is a little bit quiet. Then they start
Yeah.
to laugh, right? So well, you can talk to that. But I was going to ask, how do you know how far to push, and have you pushed too
Well,
far?
the context of that joke, since that's important, and
Yeah.
I don't want that.
It's
to,
a good joke, you guys.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding.
I don't want that to read just
Australia, I
as
think you did in Australia.
as a Huffington Post headline. But
Oh God, no. Or tweet.
there's a band called British India in Australia. It's a band, they named their band ironically British India, and I was commenting in Australia when I was doing a show there that I don't particularly like the name, but I guess Nazi Germany and apartheid South Africa were taken. So it's a reference to that. So, you know, because it's a hard joke to make either way, but I think it.
Well, he even said, I think when you made it, you kind of went, I didn't know how that was going to go or something, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think people see hypocrisy, and it's hard to like it is weird. Like the British, I mean, it's funny. People talk about the British as if they were polite colonizers, and I'm like,
Here's some tea.
yeah, and it's like they caused a famine that killed millions of people. And they also killed people with guns and whatnot. So it's just funny when people are like, "Oh, we'd really like to stay for a few hundred years, if that's okay." You know.
That's all right with you then.
It's not really.
Go over there in the corner.
You know.
Well, how do you know? How are you gauging the push? And do you realize, or have you felt at times like, man, I went too far, not because they're idiot audience, but I just feel like I kind of misread.
Oh yeah, that happens all the time,
Yeah.
and I always fear that, but at the same time, it's like it's the nature of what this is, like you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna step on toes, or maybe the audience reads it a certain way, and you just have to contextualize it a bit more to give them something. Like it's hard. It's always a hard line because like I know what I want to say, and sometimes people do laugh, but it's not actually at what I want them to laugh at. They end up
Right.
laughing at something again at face value, and I'm like, no, that's not the joke I was making. I was making this joke, but you're laughing like bullies. Like what do you do there?
Right.
So.
Yeah, so you say that you're not an activist on stage, and clearly you are not, but of course your material has an activist impact, or can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to call myself an activist on stage when I'm doing this for money.
Right,
You know what I mean? That there's something just dishonest by saying, I'm an activist for hire. Like,
Right.
it's just a weird...
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. But
Like, if I'm an activist, then how come I demanded there be hummus in my green room? Like, there's
That-
something...
that's a good point. Yeah, you are a
When
bit of
has
a
that
diva.
ever-
You're a diva activist.
Yeah.
Well, do you ever find that because of you do speak out on things that a lot of people won't as a comedian? Do your fans or do people expect something out of you, or want you to take a certain perspective, or kind of want you to push a particular agenda? The audience.
Yeah, people are constantly, why don't you write about this, or can't you write about that? And this thing just happened in Seattle, but I don't just perform in Seattle. I thought you cared about us. Oh my God, I hate Facebook. But yeah, I think there's the assumption that I'm speaking on behalf for all these other causes, and it's like I speak for me, and writing a joke is not easy, and it easily, as much as I love spoken word, when a joke feels like spoken word, you failed as a joke. You know what I mean? Like, it has to sound like a joke, feel like a joke. I need to connect with people, so I don't want to write by agenda. You write because you care about something, and I think that's hard for people that like my work because they just assume I'm going to talk about something. Like after the Trayvon Martin verdict came out, I was about to go on stage, and I remember just getting a bunch of texts and messages online, are you going to write something about it? I'm like, I'm going on stage in 10 minutes, and I'm very angry, and so I don't think it's the most conducive. So I went on stage, and I didn't really write about it. I just kind of screamed for 10 minutes. And because it's an audience, I think they came to see me. They weren't upset. They were just kind of like, yeah, we need this too,
Right,
So I mean, I
right.
think, you can't force that kind of thing.
First and foremost, you're an artist.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That's really
different
what
if you have a
bottom
bunch
line
of
is.
writers and it's a TV show, then people can write. People are like, well, The Daily Show does it. The Daily Show also has like 12 people writing every day for one person.
Exactly.
Like, I
Yeah,
got my
yeah.
brain, and I'm only kind of working every day.
Just a little bit. So prior to your comedy career, you were a human rights organizer here in Seattle. Does Seattle have an impact on your work now?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle is still where I go to write. I mean, I'm here like 7 or 8 times a year at least, and I do. There's a little theater in Capitol Hill called the Eclectic Theater, and I'll like rent it out, and I'll do like it's 40 seats. I'll sell out 4 shows and do like an hour of new material, kind of basically from scratch to see how it develops. So the first couple of shows are terrible because it's a human that has nowhere to go with anything, and if you find a little bit of light, a little bit of room to actually make something funny, they appreciate it, and by the end, it actually looks like comedy. So you know, for me, Seattle has always been a very generous audience. Seattle supports local. I get considered local even though I only lived here a couple of years, but I'm like devoted to the city. I recorded my last album in Portland.
What?
Yeah. But
Boo.
I gave it to them.
You let them have it.
I let them have it. So.
Well, this is kind of a longish question. A structural analysis often reveals that institutional racism is behind specific racist comments. Sometimes that you'll explain your jokes in terms of a structural analysis, so I'm wondering how much are you influenced by the trainings, experiences you had back in the day as a human rights organizer and with Solid Ground's Just Serve AmeriCorps program. Basically what I'm asking is, I'm looping in Solid Ground here too.
Yeah, like, oh, I liked his performance. Solid Ground contributed to the performance. I
Yes.
should contribute to Solid Ground.
Yes,
I got it.
that's what we're looking for. That's what we're going for.
Yeah.
After all, it's a fundraiser.
So it's well played, Nancy.
Thank
Guppy.
you, thank you. Thank you very much.
No, I certainly think my time, you know, I used to, well, back when Solid Ground was the Fremont Public Association, I was doing an AmeriCorps program called Just Serve, which, rest in peace, no longer exists, but it was an incredible program. And yeah, certainly I was exposed to many more perspectives as a young college graduate who thought they knew everything, but at the same time knew that, like, after the fact, like, I was incredibly privileged. And I was working with people that had many more stories than I just graduated from college. You know,
nothing.
I actually lived a life, and you know, I felt like there was a lot of, you know, wonderful shared experiences there for that year. And also folks I'm still friends with to this day that inform a lot of the thinking I have. You know, like definitely at shows there'll still be people from that time of my life who still show up and do incredible work, and having conversations with them certainly, you know, another reason why I'm not an activist, these are folks who actually do the work. They go into communities and they fight for themselves and their communities, and you know, for me that maybe informs a lot of the way I see the world and the way I write, and they're my educators. They teach me and they hold me accountable as a person and as an artist. And so yeah, certainly that year or two of my life, you know, spending it in that program through Solid Ground was fundamental. Like I don't imagine me being the comedian I am now without it. Like it just wouldn't have happened. So
That's the perfect end.
yeah,
Is it not?
yeah.
Well, Hari, thank you so much for doing your act, for being here. And the thing is, comedy, you can say so much with comedy that you can't say in any other way, and you
Yeah.
do it extremely well.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hari Kondabolu. You can't leave me here. You have to stay with me.